I'll offer my greeting, good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK, Europe, and the Middle East. Good early evening to our friends in India. Good evening to our friends in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and good late evening to our friends in Australia. Nice to see you. Hope you are all well. Tonight we have a slightly different format. We're going to be having a little bit of a slideshow with some commentary. Sometimes it's good to the themes of pilgrimage to holy mountains. You know, what is a holy mountain? Why would you make a pilgrimage there? Some of these subjects might seem a bit abstract, something you're not familiar with. It's good sometimes to listen with an open mind to people who sometimes have some wisdom. You never know, might say something wise. Sometimes something that might not be relevant now might be relevant in the future. We listen with an open mind and learn about different ways of practicing mental cultivation as Buddhist practitioners. Certainly, I hope that something I share will be interesting or useful. Abbots and teachers sometimes take periods of sabbatical leave, so taking a break from being a teacher, taking a break from being an abbot, taking a break from being a building project manager, etc. After my 10th year of being an abbot, one of my friends did give me a bit of a break. And I had discussed with some other students and friends, Cliff and Linda from Singapore, that after another 10 years of being an abbot, if I make it, if we're still around, I may have had another period of sabbatical, and we had talked about the possibility of going to a good number of holy sites that we interested in going to for a 6-month period, taking pilgrimage as a practice for 6 months. As it happened, Cliff got a new mortgage and early retirement looks like probably not so likely. And so we came up with a new idea of going to some of these places when we can, when the opportunity opens up. So some of the places we wanted to go were the holy mountains of China. There are many, but there are 4 particularly famous ones associated with bodhisattvas. So Cliff and Linda invited me. We were going to go to 3 of them. We ended up going to 2 of them. I had to rush back for an important ceremony. But anyway, back to the slideshow. I got a new phone, my every 5 years new phone, and I was testing out the camera. And this is also just giving a little bit of a glimpse of Anandagiri Monastery, place that I've been co-creating for the past 14 years. Lovely Bodhi tree stained glass window. Trying to cultivate a sense of closeness to nature, harmony with the forest, so that when you're inside the spaces that we use, you also feel connected with outside. But it does give you a little bit of shelter from the rain and the wind. This is a little garden in front of our Dana hall where we receive the offering and take our meal each day. I receive guests after the meal. Sandstone Buddha. And our Buddha statue, the main Buddha statue. And the lighting that I'm particularly proud of. That's not from Anandagiri. That's Singapore, right? So I flew to Singapore to meet Cliff and Linda, and we went to the Tooth Relic Monastery where they had a Buddhist art gallery. So I have to take some pictures. Some beautiful Buddhist art, antiques from China. This one's from Angkor, Cambodia. The next one's from Gandhara. So I was testing out my camera and enjoying taking some nice photos of these beautiful Buddhist objects of veneration. This is probably from the western part of China, Mahayana image. Maitreya, probably from Nepal. Standing Avalokiteshvara, probably from Tibet. Tang Dynasty ceramics. Very nice museum. Oh, I think it's on the 3rd out of 4 floors. We went to the museum and then we went up and there was a nice chanting puja going on. I was able to meditate, I would normally go to the Emerald Buddha and ask for protection and blessings before traveling. This time we were going to China. It was interesting that we ended up going to a Mahayana temple and it was a Mahayana puja, and I was able to ask for blessings and protection from the deities associated, the devas associated with the Mahayana. I also went to the Peranakan. What's Peranakan? Peranakan is a period or type of ceramics and architecture and clothing that the Chinese people that emigrated to Malacca, Penang, and Singapore cultivated. They kind of started to go a bit native. There was a bit of a fusion between the local Malaysian with their batik and their bright colors. And so they use these nice, bold, tropical colors. But they had these produced in China and exported for their needs, for their ceremonies, their weddings and things. I'm quite a fan of these ceramics, the blending of color. Phoenixes, celestial birds. Beautiful. People who do these things obviously have a certain amount of mindfulness and concentration. It's not applied to understanding the 3 characteristics and liberating the mind necessarily, but sometimes if you have a sensitive mind and you look at a piece of art, you can kind of get a sense for the samadhi and the presence of mind that the artist had. Next picture, I helped Cliff and Linda to design their shrine meditation room, and that's where I slept that night on the eve of our travels, and I felt right at home. Yes. Singapore Airport has a rainforest in a dome, quite extraordinary, about the size of a football field, maybe bigger. Very nice in between flights or after checking in to go and walk among the trees and hear the sound of water. Okay, this is Emei Sun. So Emei Sun is one of the mountains. Mount Emei is one of the mountains associated with one of the bodhisattvas. The bodhisattva that it is associated with is Samantabhadra. Now, personally, I don't know very much about Samantabhadra, and I don't even feel yet a particularly deep connection. But it's one of those things. I had made a vow, an aspiration about 18 years ago that I wanted to go to the 4 holy mounts of China. And Emei Sun is one of them. So we went. And it's 3,200 meters tall, Emei Sun. And we had an interesting experience. It turns out Cliff and Linda had been before, but it was when they were young and youthful, and they had kind of forgotten how many steps there were. And so they didn't warn me, Lumpur. And so we we actually went to a different monastery earlier, one of the oldest monasteries in the area, where there is the oldest image of Samantabhadra. And I don't know if you can click forward a little bit, JC, see if we can find the picture of this one. This is a very old bronze image of Samantabhadra. He was riding an elephant. this building that he is housed in is made of bricks. It has no beams. It's kind of like a chedi. It's a very, very old structure. Mount Emei is apparently the place where the very first monasteries in China were built. So in that regard, it's a holy site because it's where Buddhism began in China and began to take its roots and spread far and wide. But there was a lot of destruction during the Cultural Revolution, but this building, because it was bricks and mortar, did not get burned down. And the statue, as it was very good bronze, also did not get damaged. And so in the 80s, the government in China went through and made a list of important historical Buddhist sites and allowed for rebuilding. And it's very interesting because they've rebuilt in a traditional style with traditional materials, and a couple of decades have gone by, when the moss and the mold and all these things grow back, it really looks quite old. So we stopped at this temple, which was lower down the mountain, probably at about 1,000 meters. And I did feel a tremendous sense of familiarity here. And an interesting thing happened. I don't know if there's a staircase. I'm not sure if I shared that picture. This is the chairlift up to, yeah, there's these kind of staircases. So I'd had a kind of a half nap, half sleep, half meditation experience on the plane on the way over, on the airplane, where I'd actually seen the staircase up to the temple in my mind before we got there. And when I got there, I'm like, oh, this is okay, this is where we are. And so this temple did feel rather special. And we did find that we asked the monks, there's a lot of people coming and waving incense, not much meditation occurring. But we asked the monks if we could meditate, and they took us to a tea room a little to the side, and we were able to meditate there for an hour or so, undisturbed. But I really enjoyed the trees jutting up against the paths. It's such a lovely sense of, a monastery nestled among a forest on a mountain. Very beautiful. Where are we, JC? We lost our order. There we go. Yes, and you see, there's normally a weeping willow tree is not, it's like 5 or 6 meters tall, but this one is like 15 meters tall. Get the sense that these trees are at least a century, maybe 2 centuries old. So beautiful. And I've been doing a little bit of water painting in the recent years, and Chinese painting is one of my references. And so it was really lovely to be walking in the environments that look just like Chinese paintings. And so after our meditation, that's my normal policy, is after the meditation, we're allowed to take some photos. So we're taking photos after the meditation. But these are the newly built structures, but they did a very nice job. A lot of elephants in this monastery. For some reason, Samantabhadra is portrayed as his vehicle, his celestial animal that he rides is an elephant. But, so you see a lot of elephants. This lovely sense of harmony with nature in the Chinese temples. Big incense pots in the outdoors, huge cast from bronze, usually with dragons. I was surprised and interested to notice how much gray and black there was in the aesthetic of these Chan monasteries in China. It looks almost Japanese, and then you realize, well, yeah, a lot of Japanese culture and traditions came from. Chan comes from the word jhana, and Zen comes from the word Chan. So the Chan tradition spread to China, the Zen tradition spread throughout Japan, and obviously a lot of the aesthetic went to Japan as well. It's very beautiful the way that lovely weeping willow tree, it's amazing. Very interesting the way they make the outside harmonious with the surrounding nature, but the inside of the shrines is very colorful. It's so when you go to do your chanting and it's brightening the mind, gladdening the mind. You can imagine in winter it's probably about -10, and a lot of the trees would lose their leaves, and would be very nice to go and see some warm colors, I would think, when outside is white. Excuse me, I have a cat behind my Melanie. He wants to be included. Yes, beautiful incense, bronze incense pot with dragons. As we were coming up, yeah, this is one of the things I noticed. I've wondered why the bamboo in Chinese temple paintings is so elegant, and the bamboo in Thailand tends to grow in clumps, but most of the bamboo in China is of a type that grows as separate strands. Every kind of 30 centimeters or so, a new strand comes up, and so they naturally look much less messy than the Thai bamboos. Very beautiful. And the new ones come out with a grayish shade, and the older ones come out with a dark greener shade. Another thing that I'd been confused about in trying to study bamboo painting is sometimes the stripy bits are white and sometimes the stripy bits are black, and I couldn't work out why. But now I know why. This is the thing. This is why you have to go there and look at things and feel things and observe. What it is because it's an area of so much rain and mist and fog. After 1 year, the little dew droplets that get caught on those white areas becomes mold, and that mold turns black. So probably for the first year, the bamboo has white stripes, and after a year, the bamboo has black stripes. Now I understand. Okay, the pose, the Mount Emei portrait shot. This sign apparently says the first mountain, the first mountain, or number one mountain. Is there a picture of it misty, Jason? Before it was, yeah, like a little bit like that. Is it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I shared a really misty one. Probably didn't. So anyway, as I was saying earlier, Cliff and Linda took me to this place. We got on this bus that wound up and up and up and up and went rather fast and very, very tight. Probably had to because of the steepness, very tight corners and just winding up and up and up and up and up. And so then we got out and we had to climb some steps until we got to a big chairlift. And I was assuming that when we got to the chairlift would basically take us more or less to the top. And nobody told me just how many steps there were. So anyway, it's about a mile. Imagine this, a 1 mile long steep staircase going upwards. So you climb that, climb, and also visualize that there's five layers thick of Chinese people coming down that staircase while you're trying to go up. And every now and then one of them stops to stare at you in your way. So it's quite a bit of weaving in and out of masses of humanity. And, but, you know, we made it. One of the wonderful things about traveling with Cliff and Linda is they spent 10 years in China. Cliff used to work in China and they speak Chinese, and they also know how to use the local apps. So halfway up the mountain, we decided rather than go all the way up, because it takes about 6 hours, and then come down in the same day, that we would try to stay on top of the mountain. And Cliff was able to book a hotel halfway up the winding mountain road with get us 2 rooms. So we were able to spend the night on top of the mountain. So we got to the chairlift. Chairlift is a big thing. It's more like it's the size of a sea cargo vessel. You know, it's like one of those, I think you can fit 100 people into one of these chairlifts, and it's windows on all sides. Sometimes the numbers of people going up here is really quite vast. So we went up the chairlift and very fast, very steep. And we came out and I was thinking, oh, we must be close to the top now. So walk. It turns out that after the chairlift, there was 2 miles of steep staircase upwards. And I worked it out as being 4,500 steps to the top of Emei-san. That's when you take the chairlift. So this was definitely, what would you call it? I would call it heroic effort practice, at least for me. But I did notice a whole bunch of grandmothers and kids managing it just fine. And I was quite surprised that living in Thailand for a few decades, Thais don't seem to like exercise, and they don't seem to do much exercise, unless they're farmers and they have to. But if you're of a kind of middle class or office worker or a teacher or something like that, in general you don't exercise. It's too hot, sweaty, and uncomfortable. So in China, it just seems to be part of the culture. I think in their national parks, there are a lot of mountains, there are a lot of national parks, and there's a lot of steep staircases up them. It just seems to be part of what they do. I was very impressed. So eventually we got there, and it was covered in misty clouds. This particular image, which is kind of a Samanta Bhadra facing four directions. When we got there, we couldn't see anything, but after 20 minutes, if you go to the next picture, we saw. Oops, we lost it again. After 20 minutes, the cloud cleared, and we got a lovely visage of this beautiful statue. So this statue, and that's considered a minor miracle, but apparently if you have vast merits, the sky will clear and there'll be like a rainbow in the sky. I only have modest merits, so the cloud cleared and we could see the statue. But the people around us were pleased because they were saying, apparently, we've been waiting for that Mr. Cloud. We wanted to take a picture. So it did clear, and we were able to take our picture. And I don't know if, like as I said, I don't feel any particular connection with this bodhisattva yet that I'm aware of. But when we got to these stairs, I understand we just climbed 4,500 steps, and we have another big staircase in front of us. I did have this experience where I felt like I could float up these last steps with no fatigue and no pain. And so I do think something, possibly a deva, maybe a dragon, something helped. It could have just been faith or joy, relief, making it to the top. But it was a lovely sense of floating and happiness. We attended an evening puja in the Dharma Hall. I think it's called the Golden Pavilion, behind the this amazing statue. This statue is 48 meters tall and 660 tons. There's no road up there, so I don't know how they got it there. I'm assuming that they poured it in pieces and welded it together. I can't imagine how else you get such a fantastic and it has a hole underneath it, like it's you can also go in there and circumambulate on the inside. It's really quite beautiful. So there we are, quite pleased with ourselves. We made it to the top. This is the next morning. One of the Cliff's in front, his younger brother is also there. And his younger brother had altitude sickness symptoms, a bit like asthma. I also had a bit of a headache, because going from ground level to 3,200 meters, after a couple of days, probably normal, but you do feel most people probably feel some altitude effects. It's like we're kind of literally above the level of the clouds. It's one of the things you do there. You go and try to see sunrise. And you see the blue on our feet? This is very interesting. They have these rubber glove things that you put over your shoes so that your socks and shoes don't get wet. First time I saw them. So I was just enjoying taking some arty photos. Just dawn light. You see, you really are above the clouds. It does feel quite magical. And then again, if you have vast merits, the clouds stay down below and the sky becomes blue. If you have modest merits, the clouds lift after dawn and rain on you. So, but isn't it beautiful the way the lights reflect off the ground, and the whole thing was kind of blue, an interesting kind of a blue color, the sky. So after breakfast, we had to go down, and I wanted to know how many steps we climbed, because I wanted to know, am I making this up in my mind? It seems like thousands, and it seemed to take forever. So we decided to walk all the way down and not take the chairlift, and I counted the steps. So from as people who know Adinasha know that I have a bit of a thing about counting things. So yeah, so I counted. And I wanted, so it was approximately 2,500 steps from the top of the mountain to where the chairlift comes to. And then it's another 4,500, no, 3,500 from where the chairlift gets out down to the bottom. So it's about 6,000 steps. And, but it was so nice to, I think there might be some more staircases. It was so nice to just enjoy these fir trees, the white Chinese pine and the cypresses and the cedars, and enjoy the kind of moss growing on the side of these granites, and just see how many other people were climbing up as we were climbing down. Climbing down is easier. Mind you, 6,000 steps all going down. There's certain muscles that do get fatigued. We were very fortunate. There just happened to be a hot pot restaurant that was about 3/4 of the way down the hill after we'd paid respects at an old temple that worked out very well for my mealtime. And we were able to dry out a bit and warm up a bit and have a Szechuan style hot pot. Okay, so this is, I get down the bottom of the hill. This is in Emei city. So we've come down from the mountain and we're checking out. Again, you see how kind of Zenish that looks, you know, the black and the gold and the gray of the tiles. So we were just enjoying an ancient temple. And I'm not sure, my mind isn't like, I'm not, what do you call it? I'm not a archaeologist. I'm not like writing down exactly how many centuries, exactly how many dynasties or whatever. I just notice that it is a place of reverence, place of practice, many centuries old. Soak up the atmosphere, try to find a place to meditate, and then take some nice pictures. That's what I do. And I think we might have a few more pictures. Beautiful incense pots. Yes, again, Omai-san on Samantabhadra on an elephant. Another weeping willow. And I enjoyed noticing the magnolia trees, the bamboos, the later on I found some peonies blossoming. So Mount Emei is not very far from Western Tibet, Kham province. So we bumped into some Tibet monks. So when we were at these places, I was reciting the mantra of the Bodhisattva just as a samatha practice. And Bodhisattvas, beings that decide to stay in samsara, delay their own liberation for the sake of others. It's probably not a bad idea if you are a person who has a faith proclivity to recite the names of bodhisattvas occasionally, because they are particularly benevolent people who have a lot of merit and powerful minds, and they can probably help people if you have a karmic connection with them. So it's not a bad thing to, when in Rome, as it were, mutter some mantras. Okay, so this is a different place, and this was a real surprise. Cliff says, I want to take you to this place because there's this cave sculpture of Avalokiteshvara, which is in good condition. So he gave me an option. He said, do we go to the biggest Buddha statue in the world carved from a cliff face, or do we go to some ancient cave monasteries still in good condition sculptures? I said, well, it's got to be the ancient cave monastery. So that was a 4-hour drive. And I tell you something interesting. China is a very interesting place. I've not experienced anything like it because the highways are new. They're all tree lined. The cars are new. And there's no one on them. And so Emei-san was a city of some millions of people. And where we were going, Chongqing, is like 30 million people. And so we were moving between, so Chengdu, I think, was 18 million. And Emei-san city was 2 hours drive from Chengdu. And then we were going to Chongqing. I found this slightly humorous because when I was a little boy, my twin brother and my younger brother, we used to call Chinese people Ching Chongs. And now we were going to Chongqing. And I was going to Chongqing with my Qingzhong friends, and my inner child found that humorous. I hope you don't think that I'm being silly. But anyway, so I've never heard of Chongqing, but it's the biggest city in China. It's 32 million people. It's a more population than the continent of Australia. And I'm like, it was a 4 hour drive from Emei city to this place, Dazu Caves, which was 2 hours, I believe, out from Chongqing. And so this was developed during the Song Dynasty, the northern and southern Song Dynasty, and it's really amazing. Sandstone cliff faces, which have been turned into meditation caves. I guess it's something a bit like an Ajanta and Ellora, but in China. They also had actual temples in wood. So it seems like I think they call them grottos. These cave sculptures seem to have had a function of teaching. They would use them as a teaching medium. So we just kind of come out of another new car and another new bus and another nicely renovated, and we walk up here and it's like, oh my goodness! Again, this is many centuries of Buddhist practice. So a lot of the Buddhist culture and the artifacts were destroyed during the Cultural Revolution, but the fact that so much remains, it gives you a sense of how much Buddhism was practiced and by how many people and for how long in that amazing country. We're kind of in the middle of it, in the middle of the Chinese nation in this area. Keep going, Jesse. Yeah, so this is all new. This is the entrance to the historical park. But as you can see, it just fits in after a couple of decades. And the moss grows on it and the trees grow up. Incredible handicraft work. So this was an actual temple that's still there. I believe it was about 1,000 years old. So you can see the scale. These are quite big images, about 6 or 7 meters tall. A reclining Buddha. He was about, I don't know, 20 meters long. There are many different bodhisattvas, many different names. So we didn't have time. This one's riding a phoenix. We didn't have time to. It was all in Chinese, of course. Like, I just rejoicing in the art and in the faith and in the beauty, and soaking up the blessings. See how this Buddha has a blue dragons in his halo. Yeah. A pagoda. So seems to be the archetype of the Chinese chedi. This is what they seem to look like in China. A celestial maiden. I love this kind of. I don't know about you. Everyone's got slightly different tastes, but give me an old sculpture with some paint fading off it and some a bit of moss, a bit of mold. I get rapturous about these kind of things, but I admit that I'm slightly strange. Not everybody gets rapturous about such things. But yes, that's that 1,000-year-old monastery. There is something about walking on the paths that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other practitioners have walked on, swept, meditated on, bowed at the same images, meditated. There, it does do something to your sense of faith and sense of belonging to the Bodhisattva, like feeling that you are part of this incredible family and with shared merits and shared practices, with shared aspirations. It really is nourishing to parts of one's heart in relationship to faith, connection, communion, having a refuge in a way which is a little bit difficult to describe, but I do recommend exploring it. Many people will have felt similarly when we went to Ajanta, the people who joined me in Ajanta and Ellora. When you go to these places that were places of practice for millennia, centuries of development and faith and devotion, it seeps in, and you pick up some blessings, I believe. If you go with the heart of faith and if you go with mudita citta, you receive some blessings when you go to these places. So this is the image that Cliff wanted me to see. It's an image of Avalokiteshvara Kuan Yin with 1,000 arms. So there really are 1,000 arms. It's 1,007 apparently. And you can't quite get a sense for the scale, but apparently it takes up 88 square meters of cliff face. So it really is huge and really is quite an accomplishment. And every single hand is holding a different implement. So what does it mean? What does having 1,000 hands, each of the hands have an eye, according to the traditional iconography? So this is a symbol of vast, engaging compassion of a high level bodhisattva. They actually have the ability to be aware of the minds of many beings. They have the merit, they have the metta, they have the samadhi, they have the ability to teach, they have the ability to respond skillfully to many beings. So this is an image of a Mahabodhisattva. So our Buddha, Gautama Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, in many of his lives, would have taught tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people before he was the Buddha. That's part of how you create the merit, how you develop the following. And so this is a symbol of the skillful means and the merit and the dynamic abilities of the Bodhisattva practitioners. And it really is kind of mind-blowing. When you see it from the front, it's a bit like a big peacock with his tail spread. It's got that kind of sense. But the tail is hands reaching out for the sake of helping. So we did a bit of a chant there. Yes, and I took some pictures of the kind of lotuses that I like to paint in situ. Okay, after we went to Chongqing, we flew to Shanghai. And after breakfast from Shanghai, we went to a different holy mountain, and this is closer towards the east coast. And it's called Jiuhua Mountain. So we went to Emei in Sichuan province, and then we went to Dazu caves outside of Chongqing, also in Sichuan province. We flew to Shanghai, and then we got a car, 4 hours drive down to Jiuhua Mountain. This is a mountain associated with Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, sometimes called Earth Store Bodhisattva, in Japanese, Jizo. So this beautiful statue has been made. The National Park of Jiuhua has 99 peaks, apparently. You see these interesting shaped mountains that are around. And it has 99 temples in this day. And so they made the statue 99 meters. And this statue stands in front of Jiuhua Mountain, so that when you come into that prefecture, you pass him along the road. So I took some pictures. You can't quite see this, but I was like zooming in between buildings with my fabulous new camera to get the nice shot of Ksitigarbha in front of the mountain. But we did go and pay respect on a following day. So this is up. Jiuhua is not as high as Emei. It's about 600 meters. It's like a plateau on top of some hills, which is surrounded by higher hills. Extremely picturesque and beautiful area. We got to the guest house, and the guest house operator told us that it was going to be rainy the next day. And I asked Linda, do you mind if I go for a walk? And Linda says, well, you better make the most of it, because the weather might be bad tomorrow. So I stepped out the door of the guest house, started reciting my mantra, started walking, and I was paying attention to the directions. And this is some of the scenery, some of the pictures I took. This is the peony blossoming on the trees. I was so excited to to come across real peonies in China. And yeah, excuse me, I'm a bit strange sometimes. So this was the temple that I walked to. It turns out that this is like the most important Ksitigarbha temple And I just kind of intuited it. It's almost, maybe it's the natural kind of heart of the township, but it was quite a few windy roads, and I was reciting my mantras and walked for a couple of hours, and I find myself in front of the gates of this monastery, which were closed because the temples in China, unfortunately, close at 5 p.m. But I could kind of feel something. I felt like this is special, and I found my way back in front of the gate of the temple. I found my way back to the guest house, and Linda was like, "Where were you? Where were you? Where were you? Where were you?" I said, "You said I could go for a walk. You said make the best of it." And it, in terms of how a holy mountain develops and becomes a holy mountain associated with the bodhisattva, what had happened in this area was there was a monk from Korea, I believe, about 1500 years ago, that practiced very diligently here. And he was considered by his disciples to be an incarnation of this bodhisattva. I'm assuming because of qualities he showed, and perhaps stories that he told them when he was teaching them or encouraging them. And this monk went into retreat and apparently lived to be, I can't remember if it was 99 or 120. And I don't know if I've got my stories absolutely straight, because there were two bhikkhus. Another was Indian. I'm not sure which one came first now, I've forgotten. But there was an Indian bhikkhu and there was a bhikkhu from Korea. And both of these monks had been wonderful practitioners. And both of these monks had been considered by their students to be incarnations of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva is interesting because he made a vow to abide in the hells. He has enough merit to become a fully enlightened Buddha, and he made a vow to abide in the hells until he liberates every hell being and closes the gates of hell forever. So whether or not that's possible or not, I don't know. But that such a being exists, I don't necessarily aspire to emulate that model. But what I appreciate about it enormously is, you know what it's like when we get a little bit impatient, or you might have to come in contact with somebody who's a bit difficult and you're losing your patience or you don't want to deal with it anymore. And so if you bring to mind examples of such a being who is committed to staying in the darkest, ugliest, least attractive part of samsara, surrounded by the coarsest beings, most stubborn beings, and beings with the heaviest karma, until he personally liberates them, it does do something to one's mind when you kind of, it's like picking up a tuning fork and it's like, bing, listen to that. Listen to the sound of the epitome of altruism, humility, and patience. And then you can ask yourself, can I do a little bit better? Can I be a little bit more patient with this person? Can I forgive them? Can I? So that's why I do feel a connection with this bodhisattva, because it's such an incredible, extraordinary example of what is possible in terms of altruism and patience and kindness. And so I do know some Theravadan masters who have some special abilities, and I asked one of those masters, and he said that this being really does exist, and he was able to visit him and see him in the lower realms. And I asked him, does he suffer being down there? And he said, no, his samadhi and his compassion and his merit keep him cool. But that master who I was talking with was incredibly impressed, because he said, even so, for a being to choose to live in the darkest, most smelly, most horrible part of samsara indefinitely is just such extraordinary metta. So yeah, he's a really amazing practitioner, amazing being who could liberate himself, but has chosen not to. And the reason he doesn't. So normally on the path towards Buddhahood, if a person is a bodhisattva practitioner, at a certain point, that practitioner will seek a prediction of Buddhahood, as our Lord Buddha did from Sumedha did from Dipankara Buddha for Asankhya's and 100,000 eons ago. But some bodhisattvas develop so much, and I suppose in a way they're not suffering that much anymore. Their suffering is very subtle. Suppose you have full wisdom barami, full samadhi barami, full metta barami, full equanimity barami. You've studied with at least 20 Buddhas. You've got this huge, vast accumulation of qualities and merit. And you could ask for a prediction of Buddhahood from a Buddha, at which point your Buddhahood would be assured and you would cause a multitude to cross over into Nibbana, as our Lord Buddha did. But some of these Bodhisattva practitioners decide to do basically delay their liberation as a Buddha even further or indefinitely by making these kind of vows. Like, no, I'm not going anywhere. Like, it's like a mother who says, no, not without my children. And so he has not received his prediction of Buddhahood. He's made the vow to be particularly compassionate towards beings in hell. So it's extraordinary. The next day we went back and we climbed those steps and we meditated. One of the things I like about these are the images of Siddhikapa in the stores around this holy mountain. One of the things I like about pilgrimage practice is when you put down your normal, regular habits, in my case, that's being an abbot, building project manager, teacher. I do have time to meditate in my life, but when you put down these other duties and you are able to, and you go somewhere which is associated with a being, this is like a samatha practice. You take recollecting the example of that being as your practice for that period of time. And what happens is if you keep recollecting it through mantra, through seeing the image, through thinking of it's similar to Devanusati or Buddhanusati, in this case is Bodhisattanusati. When you're thinking about altruism, you're thinking about compassion, you're thinking of engaging kindness, you're thinking of radiating metta to beings who are struggling, and the mind does become very bright. So when you go to so what happened is this monastery that we went to, this monk who was a great practitioner, apparently he'd gone into retreat and people found him 3 years after he died, but his body had become a relic. So what does that mean? It means the body hadn't rotted. There were no signs of rotting, no smell, and the body's in meditation posture. So that meant he passed away while meditating. And then, his student, he probably said, I want to go into retreat, let me go into retreat. And in those days, retreats were years long. So somebody goes up to see how's Lumpur doing in his retreat, and it looks like he's actually passed away about 3 years ago in meditation posture and at the age of 120 or something similar. So they built a chedi to him, and that is in this monastery. So the chedi covers his body relic, and we went there early in the morning, climbed the steps, did some meditation. And then I made the decision that the next morning we would do the 3 steps, 1 bow practice while going up these steps. It's about 400 steps. Very doable. It does require energy, but it's very doable. Early in the morning, a lot of Chinese people, local people, and tourists coming to pay their respects. It opens at 5 in the morning. So the next morning we went at 5 in the morning and we got the place kind of to ourselves for the first half an hour. And we were halfway through our bowing, and then streams and streams of Chinese people coming to do their devotions. But it's very nice when you do this, 3 bows, 3 steps, 1 bow. So you can make of that what you will. You can make of the number 3 whatever you like. It's like, I will grow in dana, sila, and bhavana, bow. I'm committed to growing in sila, samadhi, and panya, bow. I'm going to purify my body, speech, and mind, bow. I'm, whatever you want to do, I'm going to have insight into anicca, dukkha, anatta, bow. You can take it as a meditation object and you can recollect, or I want to have the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, bow. Bodhisattva practitioners would do that. I want to purify ignorance in relationship to thoughts, speech, and body, bow. You can do whatever you like, or you can chant a mantra as you bow, but it's a very private. So it's a very interesting, I like it because you're in a public space surrounded by other people and you're doing a very personal, private meditation and people let you do it. Because you're doing a sacred activity, people allow you to have some sacred space around you. And so it's very interesting and it's very wonderful to be able to do that and to be in a culture where people allow you to do that. And it was very nice because a bunch of three or four younger people caught up with us, and they were also doing the 3 steps, 1 bow practice. So there were probably, I don't know, 1,000 people coming up the steps and waving joss sticks and what. But there were another group of people who were also doing the 3 steps, 1 bow practice. There's that nice sense of having some camaraderie, some friends. And of course, when you make an extra effort, it does produce merit, making more effort, and putting forth more effort, and then you can make some aspirations. One of the aspirations that I make is in my path towards my own liberation. If I go off track, may these great beings, you know, bring me back quickly. Firstly, may I not go off track. And if I do, may these great beings throw me back on track quickly. Other aspirations you can make. May I always meet Buddhas and their teachings. May I always meet well-practiced practitioners. May I always meet true Dhamma and practitioners who are practicing true Vinaya. When you go to these holy sites, you get into this mode of making aspirations and making prayers, and the staircases themselves are very symbolic. It's like you're on a path, and nobody says it's easy. You're on this upwards path, but your goal is to go up. And so you're making the aspiration. I will follow this path to its conclusion. I will follow this path to the peak of Bodhi, as whether that's as an arahant quickly, or as a great disciple, or as a teaching Buddha, or as a celestial bodhisattva, whatever. Follow your bliss. But yes, it's good to ask for blessings. And the other thing about when you put your mind in a sacred space is you do make yourself a little bit more receptive to what might you call numinous experiences or mystical phenomenon. So it wouldn't be uncommon for people to have a dream, suppose, where you're reciting the mantra, paying respects, thinking of this being. You might feel like you meet them in a dream, or there might be a message in a dream. Certainly, great practitioners, who you read their biographies, will talk about having had visions. If you're practicing on Wu Tai Shan, some people may have visions of Manjushri. If you're practicing on Jiuhua Shan, some people may have visions of Siddhikapa. Emei Shan, some people may have visions of Samantabhadra. But when you incline your mind with reverence and respect, and you practice more samatha, and you increase your merits, you do increase the chances of having those kind of experiences. And one has to be careful, of course, because some people can get deluded by those experiences. But if a person has mindfulness, one can also not be deluded by those experiences, and they can be very encouraging. Sometimes there might be a message or a teaching which is very pertinent and very helpful. So I'm not going to go into too many details, but I will say that I did have a good experience at this place that was helpful to me. There was some teaching that seemed valid and helpful and pertinent, and I was very grateful to have gone and to have had that experience. This is the actual Chedi, where the body relic of the great practitioner is interred underneath this, and there's a little hall around this Chedi, and so people are offering incense and circumambulating and bowing on top of the mountain. These fabulous incense urns. They were very strict. They would only let you offer 3 incense sticks. So I was very frustrated because I bought boxes and boxes of fabulous incense. I wanted to send up a stinking, fragrant, auspicious cloud. And this Chinese man came and said, 3, only 3. And I'm like, okay, well, how about 3 in each? So it'd be 3 and 3 and 3. So I managed 9. So yes, this is the Siddhikapa Hall. The interesting Siddhikapa is presented in 2 ways. A simple, barefoot, bald, shaven-headed monk is one of the ways he's presented. He's also presented as a Dharma king, which seems to represent the fact that his parami is full and he has full merits. The hermit on the other side is that practitioner who was practicing in that monastery, who was believed to have been an incarnation of him. they've designed this particular hall so that when you're coming up the stairs, if you look through the entrance, you can see his face smiling at you. And these are the Dharma King form of Siddhikaba. Okay, this was interesting. We had heard, I have a student slash friend studying in Beijing, Singaporean young man, who was giving me some pointers about places I might want to go. And we found this nunnery where a nun also has left a body relic, a more contemporary practitioner. She just died a couple of decades ago. And she's another example of a person whose body didn't rot after they died. So some people will be wondering, how is that possible? Why does that happen? And why is it a relic? So apparently, if you have good levels of samadhi and you saturate your elements of your body, Renyi apparently was her name, Renyi Bhikkhuni, and she had been an acupuncture, natural health doctor before she was a nun. She, if a person has really good samadhi and if they contemplate the elements and if they contemplate the body parts, like they take parts of that element as the meditation object, the purity of the samadhi, the purity of the mind purifies the elements so that when the body dies, it doesn't rot. It's one of those things, it's a miracle. And it does happen. And Thailand has examples of this as well. There are several places in Thailand where you can go and pay respects to a great master whose body didn't rot. And it's not uncommon for relics to form on little crystalline relics to form on the body as well. I've paid respects to two such full body relics within Thailand. And then as we were walking out, the nuns were doing their evening chanting. We were able to sit and meditate while 12 bhikkhunis were doing their evening chanting. It was very nice because you go to these places which are just streaming with tourists and everything's beautiful and you feel inspired and you want to meditate and there's like nowhere to meditate. So our devas, our guardian angels, helped us find that lovely spot, meditate, listening to the chanting of the nuns. And that was very beautiful. This is just outside the nuns' monastery. Ancient cedar trees. So part of, again, we're just taking pictures of the beautiful calligraphy. It's like 5 layers of Chinese calligraphy on signs. Part of what I was doing as well, several of my Chinese Malaysian students in Malaysia have asked me to take them to some of the holy mountains. And before I would do that, I have a certain reputation to uphold. I have a reputation of having led good pilgrimages, which are also safe. So before I drag a bus full of uncles and aunties, brothers and sisters up mountains, I want to see how hard it is or how easy it is. And so I'm doing a bit of a survey. So Jiuhua is definitely doable for everybody, most people, I would think. There's a couple of places where you could do the 3 steps, 1 bow, about 400 steps. I do think that 4,500 steps for people over their 70s in the rain might be a bit tough. But Jiuhua and another one, Putuo, those are doable. I've got one more. I've got one more mountain I need to investigate, Wutai Mountain, which is a 4-hour drive from Beijing, which is also at 3,000 meters elevation. So before I lead a tour to any of the holy mountains, I need to finish my survey, go there myself and see which ones are most suitable to take a group of people to. Some of you may be interested. Now, you don't have to be a practitioner of Mahayana to want to go to a Mahayana holy site. We all respect the Buddha. The approximate cause of a Buddha is a bodhisattva. So when we go and we pay respects to the places where the bodhisattva practitioners are practicing, have practiced, we're just developing gratitude and respect for the path that produced the Buddha. And this increases our merits. And so a person can go to these places and say, may I become an arahant as quickly as possible. May the bodhisattvas bless me to be able to do so. That's perfectly valid. And Luang Por Nun has told me that there's been many people in Tibet and China that were arahants, just as there are practitioners on the bodhisattva path in Theravada countries. Scholars like to come up with these theories of who's higher, who's lower, who's doing what, these people that fight over what it says in books. Wherever you have groups, large groups of people sincerely practicing, you will have people realizing paths and fruits according to their aspiration. So there are arahants, have been plenty of arahants in China, and there have been plenty of bodhisattvas in Thailand. And people should practice according to their aspirations sincerely. And I wish you every success and every support in doing so. I think we probably just have a few more pictures. Let's see now. This is the temple that I can't remember if this was the Korean or the Indian, but this is another interesting thing to notice as well. The role that foreign monks had in establishing holy sites in China. That's interesting. As a foreign monk in Thailand, I make a mental note of that. Because it can see it in this lifetime, like Tanajan Jayasari, for example, has made huge contributions to Thai Buddhism. And when Luang Por Pasno and Ajahn Samedo lived in Thailand, they did also. And apparently the Dalai Lama, the 13th Dalai Lama, was in retreat for 6 years on Jiuhua Mountain. So borders for Buddhist practitioners and wandering monks and nuns, people went wherever they went. And I did feel, as I mentioned, I did feel a sense of connection at the older temple in Emei, and I did feel a sense of connection here at this old temple in Jiuhua. And I'm not sure if I lived in those places, but if I have been a monk or a nun in China, it's quite possible that I went on the 4 Holy Mountains pilgrimage, because most people, many practitioners would have that aspiration, just as Theravadan practitioners aspire to go on a pilgrimage to the site of the birth, enlightenment, first teaching and parinibbana of Al Buddha. The Mahayana practitioners in China will aspire to go on a pilgrimage to the 4 Holy Mountains. So this is just a peek at the 3 steps, 1 bow staircase that we were bowing up. And there's a beautiful little lotus in the middle of every one of them. You go back, JC, 1 picture. See, there's lotuses. So it's like, yeah. If your aspiration is to be spontaneously born on a lotus in Tushita, you have a reminder every step you're getting closer to your lotus. That symbol, Fo, means Buddha, essentially, or Buddha, enlightenment. So you see this symbol in quite a few places. You don't often see it in blue and gold. It's quite nice, isn't it? These really cool dragons all over the place. This is at Siddhigarbha's temple. These cool dragons on incense burners, on lanterns, and these are Tang Dynasty temple lions. So centuries and centuries and centuries, they've just been sitting there in the rain and the snow and the wind and guarding the temple. So we came down the mountain, and we were lucky. The guest house operator had told us it was going to rain all the next day, and it actually didn't. We were able to do our pilgrimage, do our bowing. When we came to leave Jiuhua, and we made the aspiration that we definitely would go and pay respects to this statue, it rained on us the entire time. But it was about 25 degrees, so it didn't matter that much. Again, yeah, about another 400 steps. 99 meters. I'm not wearing my robe properly here. Please understand my robe was soaking wet by that stage. So I'd taken it off. It's like, this isn't working. So he smiles. When you look at him from a long distance under certain light, he seems like he's grimacing a little bit. But as you get closer and closer to him, it's a beautiful smile. So he was obviously designed to be smiling at those people who come to pay respects. And again, I was amazed by how many old people and young people were braving the rain and coming up and doing their circumambulations. And we did see a group of people doing their 3 steps, 1 bow practice up this staircase as well. This particular area, if people do come with me in the future and want to do a 3 steps, 1 bow practice, this is a good place to do it, because every 30 or so steps, there's a few meters of flat, and then it goes up another 30 steps and a few meters of flat. Whereas the temple that we were just looking up, it just goes up, very steep. And
Rajan, this is the last photo we have.
okay. So we probably won't do any Q&A because I've been yabbering along for 45 minutes. I hope that something I shared may have been helpful to you. I hope that whatever aspiration you have, you may receive every support to realize it as swiftly or as slowly as you like. May we all grow in Dana, Sila, and Bhavana. May we all grow in Bodhi. May we all be well and happy.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for sharing not only the trip, but the whole perspective and the whole background, and how to use that as a tool for our practice in many ways. Sadhu.
Yeah, I love pilgrimage. It's a very engaging, and I also love to study the aesthetics and come and recreate that in my monastery. Something of a holy site vibe. So,
Is it best to go in this period, Ajahn, or is
I
there any
would
other
say
season
so.
that?
You know why I would say so? All things considered, like we were rained on all those 6,000 steps down Emei-san, but it was 20 degrees. None of us caught a cold, and like the other guys were able to wear a raincoat. I had an umbrella, and even though we got rained on the last day, again, I didn't catch a cold because it's 20, 25 and the rain is warm. We didn't catch a chill, and the benefit of going in this season is there's less tourists, less pilgrims. And so many of the places we went, we saw these just incredible, almost like a maze of a queue, like where in peak season, people have to queue up for a long time to get into the bus up the hill or to get into the cable car. So none of those places which had spaces for enormous queues, we didn't really meet with any queues. And we did meet with, large numbers of pilgrims at the sites, but nowhere near as many as obviously can be at times. So, yeah, as long as you've got rubber things to put over your shoes and a raincoat. And if ever you wanted to know what, you look at those beautiful Chinese temples, staircases up mountains, mist, trees, can know what it feels like to be on a rainy, wet, misty mountain in China. When you look at that painting, you know exactly what that feels like. So I think in the cold season, Emei-san is like -10. So nobody goes to Wutai or Emei-san in winter, although that I'm sure it'd be very peaceful. But you do get strong blizzards. I'm sure people stay up there, but they have good dwellings. And so most people will go in summer, but then if you go in the wet season, there'll be less crowds. And there are meditation halls and little side rooms. Like we asked if we could meditate, and they took us to little tea rooms to the side in those places. So yeah, I think it worked. And,
Thank you, Prajan. I hope you get a chance to go to Wutai very soon as well.
there's a plan in the pipeline, but I'm not saying anything.
Sadhu.
You know me, I'm really good at keeping secrets. So,
Too wet, Rajan, to go after July.
Sorry?
It's too wet to go after July, I think.
When did you go? You went when it was cold.
Yeah, I can't remember, but it was quite some time back. If you're talking about Emei-san, Wutai-san and Jiuhua-san, I have not been before.
Did the clouds part for you, Joyce?
Not really.
Oh.
didn't have enough merits then.
We have
It
to
was
pool
quite
our merits.
cloudy.
Pool our merits and see what we can do.